Thanks for joining. Thanks for the viewers tuning in. So today we have a special content prepared for you, and the topic today will be digital trust framework. So basically everything you need to know about digital trust. And with me here today, I have graham.byrne and Ergys Hoxha.
That's right.
Hi guys. And just I'll tell two things about myself. So I worked with security here in IBM for the past 5.5 years, and different things, mobile security endpoint. But today's topic is really something that really interests me personally as well. So I'm glad to share it.
Awesome. So I'm Graham, as Petteri said. So I've been in IBM for about 18 months roughly now. So previous background in identity and access management, security, from previous roles as well, and that's essentially what I'm focused on here as well from a technical standpoint. So I'm lucky and thankful to be speaking to everyone today.
That's great. So guys, thank you very much for the invite. We've been planning this for quite a long time. You guys have noticed me with Peter making a few videos for the last couple of months and couple of weeks. So been working on cloud for the last year and a half too, with the AI from Watson. Now it's just public cloud, and we are trying to find an integrational way to work with the security and the security team, Master 360 and digital trust. So thank you guys for attending, and hopefully you will definitely learn on how to protect and find new ways on phishing attacks. What needs to be done?
Yeah, we'll talk through everything that that encompasses what we see as digital trust, and what IBM's thoughts and the controls that we can put in place or help you put in place to actually do as well. So without further ado, we'll kick in.
Yep.
So I wanted to start things off with kind of just maybe a bit of background in terms of the approaches to security today, particularly around multi-cloud, hybrid, your mobile workforce as well. And to put it into a bit of context of your applications are now everywhere, your data is everywhere, and your users are accessing these things from different locations, pretty much anywhere, whether it's a mobile device, a laptop. The idea of your centralized data and your well-defined perimeter of a data center is something that not necessarily a thing in the past, but people are definitely shifting towards a cloud approach, whether that's development, building applications, all that good stuff is in there. So the combination of environments means that the sensitive and critical enterprise data, those controls aren't really there anymore, and the control points for security have kind of shifted away from the organizations towards the cloud providers. And we want to, obviously IBM being one of those, so we want to make sure that obviously we provide the best experience for everyone as well from that perspective, cloud security wise. So we're going to take a look at how do CIOs and CISOs retain control and put controls around that kind of new landscape. And that's kind of where the next slide comes in. So we want to, as that kind of in today's world, you want to build your strategy, you want to build the trust, and obviously defend from that perspective as well. And it has to be, done obviously very quickly. You have to do it confidently with managing your threats, and you want to establish that digital trust earlier on. And we'll go into a bit more detail around what we mean when we say digital trust and protection, and then obviously around strategies and risks as well. Today's connected culture expects to interact with businesses, digitally, immediately, and with privacy as well from that perspective. So companies have to operate in an environment where security is a must, but end users also want that seamless experience.
So maybe a quick question there. Are we talking about small businesses, or are we talking about
every business? It doesn't
doesn't have a minimum of employees or anything?
No, absolutely not. If you have people connecting to your data, whether that's employees or your own customers or consumers, you want to provide them a good experience and security. Repeat business. Your customers are happy, and you're meeting their expectations.
No, and I see that shift that in the past worked a lot with the, let's say, the bigger guys, but now it's really any kind of company you come across.
Yes, especially with software as a service and adopting those applications. Even a small business can use those apps to grow very, very quickly. So providing a level of security for that as well. Whether that's through
Yes.
Digital trust, you're managing threats, all that stuff. It comes into play as well. So regardless of business size, I think it's important that you actually have a strategy and you're actually proactively defending against those attacks as well. So the zero trust framework. So on the side of that, obviously zero trust has been defined by Forrester. So a strategic initiative combined with a focus framework to allow decision makers and security leaders to challenge and eliminate inherent trust assumptions in security strategies. And that's kind of one of the biggest ones. So the trust assumptions that people make in terms of just assuming where maybe a threat is coming from or what an end user is doing, or from that side of things. So I think when we look at this, two sides of the same coin in terms of identity and access management and data security, it's obviously the one thing I would say it's easier said than done. It's very easy to discuss these things as we are. Yeah. Very difficult, or maybe not difficult is the right word, but a lot more difficult to achieve essentially. Going forward in terms of merging the two.
But that was one of the reasons, for the presentation. So just to really, this is only thing that I want us to achieve here is that the viewer understands after this what they need to do. So you have a good understanding of the moving parts. Then of course you can drill down to individual parts separately, but you have an understanding that these are actually essential.
Exactly, that's the strategy. From that side of things, you have to take a step back and have a look at, okay, what applications am I using? Where is my data? Do I know where it is? Do I know what my privileged accounts are? Who has access to what data? Do they still need that access? Maybe not. Maybe if they've moved, and we'll talk about that in terms of the governance side of things as well.
And also it gives them a great perspective on being safe in the cloud and having everything work, all the workloads being moved around, and everything that goes around stays there, and it doesn't get touched by anybody.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the identity side of things for me has always been paramount. So, the organizations nowadays, they face a unprecedented risk of financial and business risk, especially around the likes of GDPR as well. With that coming in for not enforcing security policies and assuring that those adequate controls are in place and that you can prove you're doing it. And the one thing I would say, obviously, that's kind of made apparent from this slide as well, that no matter where we sit, or the customer sits, whether it's infrastructure, platform as a service, or even software as a service, that you're always managing your people, i.e. your identities and your data, from that perspective as well. So I think that's important kind of distinction to make, that regardless of where we are in that stage, how you define access to that data, and what users can access it is still yours to do. And that's one of the main pieces that I wanted to get across with this one as well.
Very good.
From that perspective. So in terms of that as well, so we talked about digital trust briefly, and I want to kind of go into a little bit more detail in terms of what we actually mean by that. So we want to enable the right user, the identity, under the right conditions, to have the right access to the right data.
No more than that.
No more than that, right? So it builds off the zero trust platform essentially that we just looked at. So the right user, obviously, am I who I say I am? Can you prove it? What are we doing to get that established essentially? Under the right conditions, in terms of what device maybe you're coming from. Is it a company owned device? Is it your device? How do we establish that? How do we understand it to have the right access? So do you need this access? Is this data pertinent to your day-to-day role? Do you actually need it? And then obviously the right data in terms of obviously establishing, essentially to have, is that data pertinent again to what you need to do? Are you accessing data that's maybe outside the scope of maybe your role, or have you gained over time, maybe if you've been in the company for a while, more and more ability to access more and more ability to access data that maybe you just don't need anymore.
That's true. And I'm sure everyone can relate to that, see that happen.
Yeah, exactly. So an example of this would be in terms of trade-offs would be something like multi-factor authentication for every application or every access by every user. That creates an experience where it's just frustrating.
But just for the people out there, a multi-factor authentication. We're not talking about minutes of authentication. We're talking about
we're talking about seconds. Yeah,
seconds. Right?
Yeah, seconds.
Okay.
So
okay.
yeah, I mean, there's multiple different ways of doing it in this day and age as well. But I think it's important to have that context, you know, around the right conditions and the right access, you know, so that you actually have, you know, if an end user's behavior maybe is slightly risky, or they're coming maybe from an unknown device, and we'll kind of look at that in a sec to kind of give you more context around what they're actually doing, rather than just deploying, you know, a blanket policy and, you know, frustrating everyone trying to do their jobs. You know, from that perspective. So
that's very good.
Yeah, exactly, and that's where the idea of, and again we'll touch on this more, the idea of conditional access comes in. So those rules to build off, you know, the context essentially that you'll get. And speaking context, you know, in terms of the digital trust side of things. So this is what we mean in terms of what we look at when you're talking about context. So the user's attributes, so your email address, all the stuff that's contained like in a normal user profile from that side of things. Your device fingerprints. Device fingerprinting, you know, in terms of operating systems. What are you coming from? Is it a company-owned device? All that kind of stuff. The current user's activity, you know, in terms of what you access on a day-to-day basis, you know, is something, you know, maybe abnormal behavior for you to access out of the blue sometimes. All that stuff.
You're late at night downloading information from a repository that's critical to the business.
Exactly.
It's always, it might be just working late to meet the deadline, but you know, it's always good to know about that.
That's
exactly.
I agree with that.
And the last one I think for me is always important in terms of behavior, right? So you want to build up, and we'll talk about it in more detail in terms of the user profile, but you want to be able to build up over time that journey and the analysis, and provide that context to people that are making the decisions around policies for, you know, rather than, as I kind of touched on, the blanket multi-factor authentication policy that, you know, we know what they access on a regular basis. We know, you know, maybe office locations, where they work from, what time they access at. And, you know, that kind of builds up a profile over time. And, you know, if users deviate from that kind of pattern that we're used to, we then kind of, maybe a risk score increases, or you're prompted for multi-factor authentication. And we kind of continue to do these type of things based on, you know, user patterns and all that stuff over time. Which, you know, builds up a really rich context.
And we do have a behavior symptom. That means we usually go to the same thing as it feels familiar to do. Something that is easy to be done, downloaded, less effort. That's, you know, it's just all human things. But activity, you know, watching.
Yeah, it's when you deviate from that behavior, then you need to have a way to log that, and then get that information out when you're making decisions on.
Exactly, that's the most important part. Is presenting people with the information to make those decisions.
Yeah,
that's the most important part. So, what do we think? Tie is a bit. I'm not sure about the tie.
Hey, that was my tie from yesterday.
So what do we think? So just to put it into a little bit more kind of you know, maybe normal terms. How would you describe the picture?
Over friendly.
Over friendly, okay.
Yeah, he looks really like welcoming.
Welcoming.
Yeah, his hand is a little bit too low.
He's reliable though.
Reliable.
Yeah, I still trust him, even though he has the other hand as well.
Welcoming, reliable, trustworthy.
He's selling something.
He could be selling something. Yeah.
Could be, but at least it's a good start.
Yeah. So exactly. So that's the kind of thing. So welcoming was one of them. Courteous, kind, and inviting, right? From that side of things, and that's, you know, just based off you looking at a picture and deciding, you know, how you would describe it. So in terms of, you know, the context, that's understandable.
Security wise, yeah.
What happens if we change the context?
Whoa.
Now, how would we describe the picture?
Yeah. Hey, I know the guy.
So how would you describe it now?
Well, I mean, it's not.
Now it's a completely different context.
Picture,
It's just like he's kind of making sure that are you complying with this? Are you an employee? Do you have the necessary authentication
credentials
for that?
Exactly.
So it's a completely different image.
Exactly, and it's kind of a case of, is he welcoming anyone into this room? You know, is it a little bit kind of suspicious maybe?
Well,
you know, in terms of
absolutely. I mean, he's easy
Yeah, exactly.
Easy access.
And again, so that's where we look at stuff like this. So careless, problematic potentially, if you're not authorized to be in that room, and risky, from that side of things. And this is the kind of, maybe a real world example, or kind of an easier one to understand in terms of what we mean by that kind of context, in terms of how things seem. Are you making assumptions, without really seeing the true story behind things? So just a little bit of an introductory kind of piece to it. And then another example of this for me was always airport security.
Well,
and again, when you hear the groans in the room,
I tell you, why am I the only one who's being searched all the time?
Yeah,
I don't get it. Really, I really don't get it.
It comes from that, and it's that's user experience. You're going through airport security, and is it necessary? Absolutely. Everyone should go through it. It's a case of everyone wants a security. It's necessary to go
Privacy
through
and
to everything
security
checked.
yes, absolutely.
All that stuff. No one disagrees with that, but what people have a problem with, and maybe not have a problem with, but the one thing you don't want is the extra friction, the extra pat down, or the security, or from that side of things to have to happen. Is it necessary? Sometimes, maybe, depending on the result of a scan, or people that you're.
Well, I mean, if you have nothing to hide, then you should be
exactly
worried about, right?
I know, but that's the thing. Like, if most people don't have, but then it should be smooth sailing. So it should be really smooth procedure.
And you've hit the nail on the head there. Exactly. It should be seamless. It should be smooth. It should be very good user experience to actually just breeze through your airport security. I have nothing to hide. I just want to go on my holidays. I don't want to work anymore. Yeah. All that good stuff that we all experience going through airport security. And then you come home. So, to put it into a little bit more detail, a little bit more context, since that's the buzzword for today, we'll give you kind of real world examples in terms of percentages. And 33% of consumers said they would stop dealing with a business following a security breach, even if they don't suffer a material loss. So even just the fact that your company has been breached and has been reported or anything like that makes people go, I'd rather take my business somewhere else. Yeah.
So I had a story to this.
That's big. That's big.
Yeah. I had a client just a couple of weeks back. He called me and says, "Listen, I want to have costs, cloud object storage." I said, "Okay, fair enough, absolutely no problem." He gave me the details and the pricing, this and that, and he says, I asked him, as a curiosity, why now? Why not before? And he says, "Well, listen, I only realize now." So realizing now is never too late. Yeah. And I asked him, okay, fair enough. Well, where is your servers based? And he says, they're in the house. So if anybody breaks in the shop, has access to those servers, you literally steal them, and that's it. That's his business gone.
Well, look, the way I see this is the cost of waiting for that breach to happen. Mm-hmm. That's definitely there. Yeah. Wow, and it's really that's a big number there.
It is, considering, and the same for the one on the right. After your company is breached, 60% of your customers will think about moving. 30% actually do. 30% of your customer base.
That's a lot.
That's a significant number, and it gives you a bit of food for thought to say, is this really something I should do now, or will I just keep waiting for it to happen?
That's about every third customer you have.
These aren't small numbers. It's a big impact.
We're not living in a world where cash is flowing everywhere and things are being purchased with different items and being swapped around. Digital, everything is digital.
No, exactly.
That's it. Yeah, it's everywhere, and every day. It's everyday transactions. Your credentials are stored around. You have to have the confidence to make to the companies you give that.
We pay by the phone.
Out to. All that information.
I've seen a guy do it with a ring. Honestly, seen him scan in, gone through.
All the information and everything devices have. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's exactly it. From that perspective as well. So, how does digital trust then help businesses, right? So how do we take away from that? So how do we take a user from new to trusted? What does trusted kind of really even mean in terms of that? And how do we deliver a better user experience? How do we protect sensitive data from employee mistakes? The likes of
Right. Mistakes
saving
and mistakes.
data offline, copy and pasting where they shouldn't be, all that stuff. You know, from that perspective. And how do we stop malicious insiders or attacks from stolen credentials? So we look at these scenarios and we start to, you know, you build out your security policies and how do you do all of this? And the answer, and again, that we've been kind of banging on about, is with context from that perspective, and the tools to actually, you know, be able to do all of this, of course, as well. Which is, you know, kind of what we move on to next in terms of the tools to begin that journey of trusting your users. You know, so it's single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, which we've kind of discussed, conditional access, which we've introduced as well, the governance piece around, you know, people joining, moving and leaving the business. How do we deprovision their accounts? How do we provision their accounts when they join? And how do we control their access over time if they move around? You know, the last thing you want is someone with a toxic level of toxic combination of entitlements to different apps and different information.
Right. Yeah, that's what we kind of like touched.
Yeah,
we started like, you know, someone who's been in the company long enough has all the access and then doesn't really need them.
Exactly. How do you do it? Privilege access management.
And that's what hackers as well. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for somebody who's been a senior, who is using their device and who is traveling a lot. This is what they do. This is what they go for. This is what they fish. Simple as. And preventing this could, you know.
Yeah, there you go. Data loss prevention. That's the next one. You know, how do you put those controls in place in terms of, you know, all of that, and then biometric passcodes. Obviously, you know, I think everyone nowadays would have, at least for the most part, or, you know, maybe I'm just being a millennial. Biometrics, but
or at least they have the option to do that. So
I think it's important.
It's also something, of course, if you're used to doing something. Let's say the passcode is easier for you in the sense that it just comes naturally. But then, if these things kind of have to be educated as well. So,
absolutely.
So if you don't you know, push the awareness to your workforce, then you can't expect it to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it does become, you know, I think biometric passcodes is a good example. You know, multi-factor authentication is getting there for me as well around what's become normal, or the norm for people to actually use. Definitely. You know, around, I think the majority of apps that I'd access, you know, even maybe internally here, at least on my phone, I have a biometric passcode on. You know, whether that's a work profile, whether that's my own personal stuff, you know, that's my preference as well to actually have that.
That also ties to the airport picture and the making things easy. Because look, I mean, what is better scenario when security makes your life easier than what it used to be? It's faster. That's why I use it.
You look at, if you go through an airport, maybe even nowadays, they have the automated passport scanners where they take a picture of your face. So you don't actually need to go through, you know, where a human being actually looks at your passport, judges if it's actually you. And they still have that, obviously. But, you know, you have the option to now do it automated.
And whenever it's in use, I jump there instead of queuing up.
Think of what you just said. I mean, the person who looks at the picture constantly sees thousands and thousands of people, seconds, and does he really memorize all that? Does he really see, or is he really that much of a trainer? You know what I mean? I agree. Yes, I'm not saying anything was.
I think you know, it eliminates human error.
Simple. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I try
exactly. So again, all the tools and everything, you know, that we kind of talk about in terms of, you know, actually putting that into policy and best practice for organizations.
Because, for example, you could have a pretty lady, for example, or another girl or something that preferences your eye or your emotions, and you will get easily manipulated in that sense. And that person would be carrying something that shouldn't.
Yeah, exactly.
100%.
Is this personal experience?
Yeah. Moving swiftly.
Definitely not. No, guys.
So we
have my guard of anything. I applied for the guards years back. I was almost in there. I have friends in the guards. I definitely know.
So we introduced the kind of the word framework and stuff at the start, and you know, that's what we're gonna talk about next in terms of, you know, IBM's framework for delivering digital trust. And I think as organizations kind of combine the context of, you know, data security and identity and access management, you know, following a model or, you know, a strategic framework, kind of gives you an idea of how to proceed. So this is a 5-step model. It's continuous in nature. So we're going to just take a look through it in terms of what it is. Obviously, step number 1 is perform the assessment, and we kind of introduced it. So you need to take a step back and identify exactly, you know, where your data is. You know, hybrid multi-cloud IT environments, Do you know where it is? Can you classify it? What endpoints, what workloads, where is it? And then perform obviously your vulnerability assessments in terms of gaining more insight into exactly where you need to start from that side of things. Step 2, establish identity. So we kind of touched on this in terms of the governance already, but discover, onboard, and classify all your users, and that goes for internal, external, privileged accounts, human things, apps, devices, all the stuff that's accessing your data on a regular basis. Support self-service and personalization, and enable strong multi-factor authentication from that side of things as well. Defining your policies, so define a risk tolerance and access rules to the business processes, and I think that it's a good point to make as well in terms of aligning the access rules to meet the business processes. Because a lot of the times the two can kind of conflict, in terms of like the blanket multi-factor authentication policy, which no one likes, from that side of things. So the context is an important one, and establishing who should have access, as it says there, to what data and under what conditions. And something that should always be standard is always encrypt your sensitive data.
That was I like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Monitor the behavior. Step 4. So deliver data and identity insights and telemetry, identifying user behaviors, and we kind of talked about this already in terms of delivering those insights and the actions to take from all of this that you've established and classified to the people that are going to be making these decisions. And do that on a regular basis, like continuously audit and govern access. The last thing you want, as we kind of touched on already, is a toxic combination of entitlements. Record sessions for privileged users, if they're doing anything, maybe servers wise, maintenance, any of that stuff, accessing sensitive data. We talk about, maybe a company's crown jewels of, what data is critical, what data is most important for you. Are you recording those sessions for your privileged users who can access and manipulate that kind of stuff? And step 5, then take action. So institute proactive reporting and alerts and orchestrate your responses, from all of that stuff through, potential threats, and you want to adjust that going forward. So, even after taking action, rinse and repeat. It's going to be, the model is continuous. It's going to be, ongoing, and you keep going, until your process and the framework is mature and you have well-defined policies. You're monitoring ongoing behavior, building trust, and providing that user analysis kind of over time to the right people, and then you take action again, and you dynamically adjust that policy on the actions taken from it based on your analysis and what you see going forward. From that side of things as well. And the reason for that, obviously, and again, is the context inevitably changes for all of this. It never stays the same, from what end users access, to what data they're accessing, and who's a privileged user, privileged accounts, all that kind of stuff from that perspective.
Now that I see all of these in there, it all makes sense, and I knew of all of this in some level.
Yeah.
But to be honest, I couldn't have put it there if someone asked me to. Can you?
Absolutely.
Can you put everything there? The categorize basically what is the additional trust?
I think that's where the framework is hugely important, to kind of put a scope on it in terms of where you start and not necessarily where you end, but the continuous cycle of monitoring and making sure you're diligent in what you're doing with your security controls from that perspective. So this is what we believe in. This is what we're doing around digital trust, zero trust, whatever you want to define it as. And in more detail, we'll kind of take a look at 2 scenarios in terms of what it's like on the actual on the cycle.
Okay.
Estimate level of data access for a new employee. So we have a new employee onboarding, 9 o'clock Monday morning, the usual stuff. From that kind of aspect. So based on that, we're going to obviously require multi-factor authentication until the employee shows the appropriate behavior. So we want to make sure they are who they say they are. We want to make sure that they're not accessing anything inappropriate that they shouldn't be, and we just want to build up a level of trust over time to make sure that that user account is behaving appropriately. So continuously authenticate to ensure the users abide by the policies. Ensure employees only using approved and managed devices. So defining your policy around managed devices is a big one for people. You know, have you got to bring your own device policy? Are you managing, access from someone who can access from their own personal device?
See, Peter was saying that earlier on in the other slide. He said it actually makes sense right now, and by seeing everything, and it makes a big difference on the daily routine that we have here in IBM. Example, we have to change our passwords every 2.5 to 3 months to make sure that we are.
I think that
we're not getting used to the same password as well.
The biggest one that I always kind of puts it into context. What's the first thing you have to do when you get to IBM every morning?
You have
scan
to
your badge. That's you
Yeah.
establishing who you are, and you get access to.
It comes so naturally. Yeah.
Not just scan the badge, lads. You have to look at the camera.
Yeah. But it's a very simple way of looking at something like this. It's the first thing you do every morning.
Yeah.
Same as when you sign in. You sign in with a password, PIN code, facial recognition, whatever it is. You do it on a continuous basis. It just becomes a norm. You actually know what you're actually doing from that perspective.
But I mean, and I understand for some organizations. Well, it also comes to play like what's the size of the organization. We have a few thousand people in this campus area. It has to it has to match the customer, the organization, how they work. So maybe in another organization maybe be something else, and maybe there is not so much control. Someone can sneak in, these sort of things. In here, it's much harder thing.
Good that you just mentioned the sneak in. We have that security guy, the really really good one that waits at the corner for people sometimes in the morning when they come in the mass.
People that don't scan their badge.
So people that forget their scan, forget anything like that. He waits at the corner and he makes sure that everybody has the badge. And I find that
it's important.
Okay, it needs to be done, right? I know, but
that's what I mean. It depends on the organization. So let's say
there was a threat.
Yeah.
In case there was a threat, in case there was a guy who recently got let go and want to take revenge, want to take some data out, you want to do anything, that is the threat right there, and you were preventing it. Right.
And what he's doing right there is implementing a zero trust policy.
That's pretty much.
That's that's
really good.
Like
good man
that,
yourself.
That's it.
But so that's again real world examples and what we see on a day-to-day basis that you just don't. You don't really think about it. Maybe after you've had your morning coffee, but certainly not at 8:50 in the morning when you're coming in.
I think some people are maybe not really getting used to the fact where you have to authenticate here, use here, change password there. Make sure you're on the track constantly because they think that you're losing to technology, but you're not really losing technology. You're just adapting and using that as an advantage.
That's
exactly. You know what I mean? That is the thing that I get that from some people.
And the way I see it, there's not huge leaps in technology like they used to be when, let's say, these things came out like 10 years ago, a bit more now. But there's every year I see things getting a little bit easier on some parts. So it gets a little bit more, smoother to use this or some of the things on the background like security doesn't affect me anymore in the level that used to be.
Providing a good user experience.
Well,
that's exactly what it's all about. If you like what you do, you're using the tools that you're using. Most of the time, you won't even notice. You'll just do it. And again, so that's what we kind of, when we look at the scenario, when we complete it, with context changes. In terms of monitoring the behavior over time till the employee is trusted. When they introduce maybe if it's a new IP address, new device, re-authenticate. We want to make sure you are who you say you are. And if the risk score increases, we force a login, we change passwords, and we restrict access based on what they can access as well. So from start to finish, through steps 1 to 5.
It took me ages to get the Wi-Fi authenticated on the phone.
So an employee accidentally attempts to remove sensitive data from the network. So not necessarily a malicious actor, but someone that's perhaps just made a mistake, and what they're trying to do is deemed by the security policy as potentially harmful. So a trusted employee has access to sensitive information. So there's where we start and we perform our assessment in terms of what they have access to and what type of information it is. An attempt to save data off the network was create an alert. So the risk score increases and multi-factor authentication is now required just for normal access. So that's the context changing, right, immediately. Policies update to block users from saving sensitive information to unapproved repositories, right? So that's a change where we've changed the policy to say, okay, well, we've noticed this now. we want to stop our users saving to, you know, thumb drives, USB drives, anything that's off our network, right? We want to be able to control where that data can go. And we want to monitor that user's behavior ongoing. So they move onto a risky user list, for continuous monitoring across their environment in terms of what they're accessing and what they're doing. The employee access continuously authenticated and blocked from that sensitive information until we can, you know, make an assessment or judge, you know, that maybe the act wasn't particularly harmful, but we want to make sure that our data is safe and secure. Encryption keys roll over and the employee risk score increases again, depending on obviously what they've done, you know, from that perspective as well. And that employee then, you know, in terms of taking action, do we remove their access from this sensitive information? Do we leave them on, you know, a continuous multi-factor authentication policy until we're again become trusted? Back to that scenario.
So all the things that happen there can be different scenarios. If they download it to a USB drive or something, that might be something that maybe they've done that in the past, but now they know that look, you're not supposed to do that anymore.
Exactly,
really
that's
high risky.
That's the security controls. You know, that's stuff that you're going to put in place over time to, if it's well defined, you know, you'll be able to change it. You know, while you're on the go. You know, in terms of constantly monitoring it as well, you know, from that perspective. And these are just two scenarios, you know, that we kind of look at to kind of introduce it. You know, there's potentially hundreds more, you know, that we could have used for an example, but you know, just in terms of, you know, kind of bringing the topic home. And again, we've kind of looked at, you know, the real world examples of the user behind the you know, entering the door, the airport security, and all the tools that you need. So, you know, from our perspective in terms of you know, the view of the IBM framework, you know, that's essentially our take on it. You know, from a security perspective, and what we did, we obviously have cloud, we have security from, you know, representation here, but it's not just one department, right? We work together. We like to bring that, you know, to people to help them understand and you know, be able to implement these types of controls and tools going forward. So really happy to, you know, to deliver the video, the presentation. I hope you guys really enjoyed it. I hope you learned something from it.
Absolutely.
And thanks for watching, and thank you guys for participating.
Yes,
thank you.
Exactly.
Appreciate it.
One more.
One more.